You need to understand arguments from authority. Because if you don't understand what that is, not only is it likely very adversely impacting your investing, but it also is probably hurting you in other aspects of your life as well. And so, what an argument from authority essentially is that instead of thinking through something for yourself through first principles, you basically outsource that thinking process to someone else. An argument from authority just basically means you take the conclusion and you stop thinking about it at all just because of who is saying it. Now, this is very commonly done in finance when you hear XYZ investment bank just put a buy rating on the stock, and so people go and buy it just because of that. Or perhaps an investor you like has bought a stock, and so for that reason alone, you decide I'm going to buy it too. Now, there's other aspects of argument from authority. It could be an institution or a university says that you shouldn't do certain things for your health or you should. There are all sorts of different areas where these sort of arguments of authority permeate your life. Now, that's not to say that you should ignore any body of authority. That is not the point I'm trying to make. The point I'm trying to make is you need to think through these things for yourself, especially when we are dealing with finance and investing. And that is because of incentives. In investing, it is very often the case that when someone tells you to do something because it's going to make you money, it is because it is also going to make them money and maybe lose you money. They probably don't care about you, to be honest. Sorry, that's just probably true. And so whenever you are dealing in finance, you have to be extremely careful because even if someone does have your interest in hand, they also maybe just don't know for themselves. It is very common for people when they become wealthy, they get a wealth manager and they want to go to Goldman Sachs or Morgan Stanley, one of these big brand names, and they think that just because it is a well-known name that is giving them recommendations, that they are safe from doing any sort of thinking and diligence themselves. And at its best, this is why we like brands. The idea behind a brand is that you can trust them and they're supposed to deliver on that promise. However, when you are dealing with finance, it really is different because, again, there are a lot of pernicious incentives that can exist. And so, for example, you may have someone recommend that you invest in a certain product, and it turns out the reason why they're saying that is because they will make money off of it on the back end because of a placement fee or something else. And so be careful when you are dealing with finance. Now, what I really want to do is tie this into the importance of investing and avoiding these arguments from authority. Now, this is really important because essentially what investing is, at the end of the day, it's really about just making a judgment. Yes, you need to do a lot of research and understand a lot about the businesses, the industries, competition, all sorts of different things, do your valuation. But at the end of the day, you have to make a judgment. You're making a judgment on what you believe the growth is going to be of the business. You're making a judgment on what you think competitors will or won't be able to do. And you're making a judgment on what you believe the return is going to be owning this stock. And so all of that is really just the crux of investing, is you are making all of these different judgments. Now, when you are relying on an authority, though, to make that judgment for you, you are outsourcing the most critical and key parts of investing to a third party. Now, forget whether or not this third party has your best interest in hand, in which case, by the way, they usually don't. But even if they did, you are not really investing. You do not really know why they came about those answers. It could be a totally different reason than what you think or what you would ever be comfortable assuming yourself. It is possible an investor took a position in a stock because it's a hedge for a much larger position they have. It's also possible that maybe they have a different exposure with derivatives, or they have a different position that can offset that position if something else adversely happens. There are all sorts of different reasons why someone may buy a stock, and it could not be what you think. And so what you want to do instead is you want to make your own judgments for yourself. Now, I'm not saying you totally ignore what the investment banks say, what the sell side research analyst says, or what an investor you like says. No, definitely listen to all of that information. But what you want to do is you want to understand their thinking. How did they arrive at the conclusions they did? An argument from authority basically means you take the conclusion and you stop thinking about it at all just because of who is saying it. That is what you want to avoid entirely, because even the best investors can make mistakes all of the time. Warren Buffett invested in Paramount, a bunch of airline stocks, a lot of investments that really did poorly lately. Of course, he is still one of the greatest investors of all time, but if you were to just pick these investments up and try to do a little bit of diligence for yourself, it is possible that you came to the conclusion that this is not something you want to invest in. And how upset would you be at yourself if you bought it just because Warren Buffett bought it? And had you have done just an hour of research, you would have found out that this is not something you would have ever wanted to own. Now, of course, Warren Buffett is still one of the greatest investors of all time. The point I am trying to make is that you need to do this research for yourself. So now that you're aware of what an argument from authority is, you will start to notice it everywhere. A lot of times, people either do not or cannot critically think. And so instead, they rely on these shortcuts of thinking. And so they just look at these brand names, these well-known people, and just outsource their thinking process to them. Now, that is okay for certain areas of your life where you really don't have any expertise. Of course, we have to rely on other people, but that is not the case if you yourself want to become an investor, which is what this channel is about, helping people become better investors. And a big part of that is making sure that you are doing all of your research on your own. And the reason why this is so important is because when a stock does fall, you're not going to be able to reach out to them and ask them questions, whether or not they still think what they thought before, whether or not you should still hold it. And this becomes just a mess because it was not your decision to own it in the first place, and you outsource that to someone else. You now have basically outsourced your confidence in holding that stock to someone else, which means that anytime anything happens, whether it's just the stock drops, a news headline hits, earnings comes out, you constantly want to know what to do next. And you need to know what to do next because you never did that diligence for yourself initially. And so if you do it initially, what's going to happen is that when the stock does drop, when there is new news, you are going to be able to digest it and come to your own understanding of what you should do with that position, with that investment. And so that is a world of difference than outsourcing it to someone else and just nervously holding it the whole time, asking everyone what they should do. Now, I will tell you one thing that I do, which is that anytime anyone ever asks me whether or not they should own a stock, I always tell them absolutely not. And the reason why I do that is because I tell them that if you are asking other people whether or not you should own something, then you just have your answer for you right there. Anything that you own yourself, if you want to be an investor, an active investor making these decisions, it needs to be your decision. You cannot be outsourcing this to someone else, asking them whether or not this is a smart idea. Should I do this? I get that people want advice and they want to hear what other people think. All of that is healthy. But if you are ultimately only doing something because someone else told you to do it, you are not really investing. You really are speculating because you don't know why you own what you own and you don't have really any confidence in it. And so that is a really important thing that you need to be aware of. But if you want to understand the basics of how to research a stock, check out this video here. And if you have any questions, just drop them in the comments below. And if you got any value in this video, go ahead and hit like and subscribe.